Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for our series of QuickBooks Connect calls. Today we are focusing on payroll and many aspects that go into performing payroll through QuickBooks. On the line, we have Debbie Denny. She is our Accounting Services Manager here at Hawkins Ash CPAs. She is an advanced certified QuickBooks Desktop ProAdvisor and a certified QuickBooks Online ProAdvisor with more than 20 years of experience in QuickBooks. So she has a lot of experience and will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you submitted during registration. So with that, just a few housekeeping rules or guidelines, I should say. We have every attendee in listen-only mode, which means that you're basically muted. We have a pretty large group this session, so we're going to keep everybody muted. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the questions drop down in the control panel of GoToWebinar. You'll see that on your screen. I'm not sure where it is, but maybe on your right side of your screen. So drop your questions in there. Debbie will be scanning that throughout the presentation, and at the end, if she hasn't addressed your question, we can address it at that time. So with that, I will turn it over to Debbie and have a great presentation. Hi, Debbie, are you there?
Hi, Corey. Yes, I'm here.
Perfect.
Can you hear
me
away? Okay? All
yes,
right.
we can.
Okay, super. Well, hello, everybody. As Corey said, my name is Debbie Denny, and I have been working with QuickBooks for over 20 years. I started when I was 12. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a great program. I love it, and I can't say more wonderful things about it. Today we're going to be working with the desktop version of QuickBooks. We might talk a little bit as we're going along about the online version, but with QuickBooks Payroll, the desktop version I find is much more friendly. It allows you to have a lot more control over QuickBooks Payroll than the online version. The online version seems to be very locked in, and to have anything changed in the online payroll, you normally have to call them. And a lot of times if you understand payroll, that's great, but they don't. Normally the people you're talking to. So it gets a little frustrating. But we're going to start with some of the basics of QuickBooks Payroll. And what that is going to entail is looking at the preferences. So I'm going to go over to the Edit menu and then Preferences. And here's my preference menu. And the preference menu has a lot of different things in it that you can change and do things with in QuickBooks. The first thing I always do is turn off beeping when recording a transaction and turning off the pop-up messages for products and services. I really don't need to see QuickBooks advertising. And the beeping kind of drives me crazy. Those are just things that I do, and that's in the general preference. Some other preferences is in the company preferences. Here's where you tell QuickBooks if you want to see the time you're entering for payroll in a decimal portion of an hour or minutes. So if I want minutes, like an hour and a half would be 1:30. Where a decimal would be 1.5. And me, I prefer decimals, but that's totally up to you. So that's the time format preference. Then when we go down to the payroll and employees preferences, here's where it'll ask you if you're going to be doing a full payroll, manual, no payroll, or online payroll. Just different options that QuickBooks has available for you to do. One of the things I'm going to look at here is it asks you a couple different things in the main screen. If your employees are always working 40 or 80 hours, you can copy those earnings details from the previous paycheck. You can recall the quantity fields on paychecks, recall the hour fields, and job costing class and item tracking for paycheck expenses. So if you're using job costing at all, you're going to want to choose this option. And if you're using job costing and classes, which can be used together, you can also assign one class per paycheck or earnings item. So what classes are in QuickBooks is if you've got different departments, different locations maybe that you want to track things separately, you can set up classes in QuickBooks. And to set up classes, that is in the accounting preference to turn it on. But if you have people, say, working in multiple departments or multiple locations, you can assign a class per entire paycheck or per earnings item. So if they're an hourly employee and work 10 hours in the Green Bay office where I'm located, and then worked another 20 hours in our La Crosse office, you can have that time separated so the time and all the payroll expenses follow the hours that they have per class or per location. So it's a pretty powerful feature. Another item is changing the employee name display. If you want the employees listed in your drop-down by last name and then first name, or first name and then last name, you can toggle between the two, whichever you prefer. If you're in a sales type of environment, you could mark your employees as sales rep, and displaying employee social security numbers on headers in reports. I always turn this one off just because if you do like a payroll summary report, it's going to have very large columns because it's going to have the employee's name and then the social security number listed after that. Plus, for social security numbers, you don't really want that on many different things, just for liability aspect. And then we have an option for employee defaults. And your employee defaults, these are defaults that will come in every time you set up a new employee. So if you only have one payroll schedule, you can set that here. If you're tracking classes, you can set up a class for all new employees, but if your employees work in different areas, you can leave that blank and change it as you're adding employees. The most important feature here is taxes. The taxes features, I always set the state to the state that you actually work in, because that way you don't forget to change it when you are setting up your employees. If you're only based in one state, that makes things a lot easier. If you have multiple states, you might want to leave this blank. So those are the things in the defaults that I will always set. A couple other things to look at in the preferences are the pay stub and voucher printing. On this area, here's where things can get a little, I shouldn't say complicated, but you can change a lot of things here. If you don't really have vacation or sick time, maybe you just offer PTO, you can change this. So maybe I offer vacation or sick time plus PTO. So I don't have vacation, that's just PTO. So I can change the name of this, how it shows up on the pay stubs. And then say I still have sick time. You can take off employee social security numbers from the printing and only the last 4 numbers of the social security numbers. One thing I always change is I normally choose the large font size to print on the pay stubs just because it's a lot easier to read. And I will also turn off print the Intuit logo. I love QuickBooks, but I really don't need to advertise for them. My employees don't need to know what type of software I'm using to do their payroll. That's just something I turn off. I'm going to click OK here. And I don't believe there are no My Preferences. So the company preference, if you've got multiple users, company preferences are going to be for all those users. So those are some important items in the preference setup for employees. I also did get a question on for job costing and estimates and tracking that through QuickBooks. And if you want to track that, you want to say yes that you create estimates, because you can track all your employees' time by job. And if you want that to show up on your estimate sheet, you can turn on that estimate area. Again, that's in the preferences. Another item in your preferences is time and expenses. And under time and expenses, it asks if you track time. Maybe you're using a timesheet, or you want to use the timesheets maybe in QuickBooks. If you want to do that, you can say that yes, this is the first day of the work week that will show on those timesheets. If maybe your first day of the work week is Sunday, depending on your pay schedule, you might want to change that. And then if you bill your time, maybe a law firm or an accounting firm, we bill our time. And so in this case, I would mark all time entries as billable. Well, I'm working with a sample Rock Castle Construction Company, and it is a construction company. And I don't bill for my employees' time. I just bill based on a general, okay, this is how much labor I have. And I'm going to put that down as, part of the quote and invoice, but I don't want to mark that time as billable. And click OK here to change those preferences. Now QuickBooks is going to close all the windows. I'm just going to go back to my home screen. So in my home screen, again, it's got my flow chart on what I can do with payroll. Again, entering time. You can use a weekly timesheet for your employees, or you can use an individual single activity for your employees. If you're going to be using timesheets or single activities, what you're going to need to do is set up service items. And service items are what the employees are doing for work. So I'm going to look at a timesheet. And this is what I would use for job costing. So I'm going to bring up one of my employees, Greg. For my customer job, maybe he worked on one customer. I've got my service item, what he did. If I've got classes that I'm tracking, and then I can enter his hours. One thing to note too is if you'd like, these hours can transfer right onto their paycheck. So if you're entering their hours in this timesheet program, you can have them automatically come into their timesheet by, when you're setting up the employees, we'll just look at Greg again. Under the payroll info, if I check the box to use time data to create paychecks, this will bring in all the information from my timesheet into the Pay Employees window. And you can always add to that. It doesn't always have to be everything in that timesheet. You can add additional line items if you need to. I'm going to talk a little bit about payroll forms. There are different forms that you need for payroll. And one of them is the I-9 form. And I think it might pull this up on another screen. But your I-9 form is your form that tells you, or has your employees tell you that they are legal to work in the United States. And this form needs to be used for anybody hired after 10/21 of 19. They come out with new forms every now and then, so you kind of want to keep an eye on those. With your I-9 form also, you should keep this in a file separate from any other employee files. You just have a separate file of I-9 forms, because if you were ever to get visited by the Department of Homeland Security, you don't want them seeing anything else regarding those employee records. You only want them to see the I-9 forms, because that's, I believe, all they have access to see or authority to see. So this form tells your employee fills out, you have to have some proof of that, you have to have some documentation showing that they're allowed to work in the United States. So that's the I-9 form. There is also W-4s. There's a new W form that came out in 2020, or there's the old 2019 form. And then the states also have separate forms. So in Wisconsin, we have a WT4 form that we have to complete and we have to mail into the state. And in Minnesota, there is a W4MN form that needs to be completed also. I know in Wisconsin that form is used for child support purposes. So it's important to get those forms in so people can get their correct child support to the right people. Let's see. We're going to talk now a little bit about payroll items. First of all, you have items for service items, and that's in your item list. And your service items, to create those, you just click on item, new, tell it it's a service. If it's used in assemblies, if you're going to be doing payroll, those type of things, and putting this on payroll, that's going to be a service item that you're going to want to possibly put an expense account against, and then the income when you invoice it. Otherwise, mainly it's the income account, and whether it's taxable or non-taxable. So if labor is taxable in your state, you're going to mark it as taxable. If it's not, you're going to mark it as non-taxable. And then your income account. So if I've got a designer on my staff, I might bill that time separately as design income. So when I track it, that's where it's going to go. So that's setting up items for your payroll. Then you can also, or you also need to set up payroll items. And your payroll items are the items that you're getting paid. So your salary, vacation, regular pay, sick pay, your PTO. Oh, because I turned off the PTO earlier, and from vacation, I'm going to have just PTO now. I'm going to set up a new payroll item for my PTO. And I can set up either an easy one or a custom setup. I'll look at the easy setup first. And it's going to ask me what type of payroll item. Well, this is going to be compensation, but if I want to track my PTO in QuickBooks, I have to say it's a special item of paid time off for sick time or vacation time or PTO. So I'm going to choose paid time off. If you set it up as a compensation, QuickBooks will not track your vacation using that item. But by setting up as PTO, QuickBooks will track it separately. So now it's going to take me into the payroll setup. And I'm going to say it's paid vacation time off because I already have sick time set up. So we're going to use the vacation area, and then I'm going to finish. And by using the vacation area, that'll track my PTO. And let's see, did it offer me? Let's see. Now I'm going to set it up as the custom setup as a wage. You can see when you're setting it up custom, it doesn't give you an option for vacation, but it does in a minute. Right here is where it asks you if it's sick or vacation pay. So I'm going to choose vacation. Here's where it's going to let me put in a name then, PTO. Go next. And here's the account. That's the difference between the easy setup and the custom setup is the custom setup allows you to enter the account. And I'm just going to put gross wages and then finish. For the vacation, I could use that also. Just double click on it and then change the account right here. So it just depends what account you want the item to post to. Again, it's very easy once it's set up to come in and change that account. So I'm going to set up another item right now and show you the difference. I'm going to set up a 401k. And here's the easy setup. I'm going to ask again what it's for. I'm going to say 401k. And it's going to ask me what type of benefit. And it's very important that you make sure you have the correct type of benefit, because by choosing the benefit type, it's also letting QuickBooks know what code to put on the W-2 form for your 401k, your simple IRA, your 403b. So by telling QuickBooks what type of benefit it is, that will go onto the W-2 form. Say next, and it's set up. It asks you for your payee. So maybe I go through Charles Schwab. And if I've got an account number, this will print on the number, or the memo portion of the check if you're paying by check. And normally if it's something like this, I'll have the system remind me weekly. Or if you don't want it to remind you at all, you can choose I don't need a regular payment schedule. But by putting it on a payment schedule, you can see when you're done with your payroll, what liabilities are out there that you still need to pay. I'm going to click next and then finish. So there's my 401k. And I'm going to show a 401k Roth. We'll say we also have the option for a Roth. By doing a custom setup, it's going to be a deduction. I'm going to say 401k Roth. Again, the name of the agency. And your liability account. If you have a separate account for a 401k, a retirement plan, you could code that then to that retirement plan or 401k plan. So I'm just going to leave it as payroll liabilities. Click next. And here's the very important area of QuickBooks when you're setting up payroll items is you need to know the tax tracking type. And the tax tracking type, again, will tell QuickBooks what letters to put on the W-2 form and also how to treat that item for taxability. So if you're not sure what tax tracking type you should be in, you might want to probably use the easy setup or call somebody that knows your payroll. Your accountant maybe would know that. So I'm going to choose my Roth 401k. And QuickBooks is going to know for the 940, it's going to include that in wages. For the 941, it's going to include it on wages. And for the W-2, it's going to include it in wages 1, 3, and 5. But it's going to report it in box 12 and with code AA for the Roth. And it's going to check the box for retirement plan. Normally, when you choose your tax tracking type, you should never play with these taxes and if it's based on quantity or based on hours. In this case, it's going to be either a set dollar amount or a percentage. So I'm going to say neither, and select whether to calculate on gross pay or net pay. And default rate and limit. So for 2019, my 401k, let's see, the maximum amount for 2020 is $19,500. So I'm going to enter that there. There's also a $6,500 catch-up for age 50 and over. And it's going to be an annual type. It's going to restart each year. So when you're setting up deductions, say in garnishments, things like that, garnishments you're going to set a one-time limit. But for an annual, the 401k limit, those are annuals. So I'm going to finish. And I can also set up a scheduled payment for that item, where in the easy setup, it'll allow you to do that when you're setting it up. It's a separate step when you set up it as a custom setup. So we'll go to that window in a little bit. So next what we're going to do is we're going to set up an employee. So for employees, I'm going to just go to the Employee Center. And you might get to this area different ways in QuickBooks. I mean, I could go to employees here. I can go to employees up here. There's all different ways to get to the same place in QuickBooks. So I'm going to set up a new employee and put in their information. So Tina Fey is going to come work for me. It's going to be a fun day on the job. So you can enter the information. I mean, the main information you need on this screen is the name and social, but it also gives you access to put in a bunch of other information to track your employees, the name and address, and actually I'm working with a California-based company, and I think Tina Fey lives in, I think she lives in New York, actually. I saw her on Seth Meyers the other night. But anyway, any other information that you want to put in about Tina Fey. Main phone, main email, work phone, mobile fax. And again, you can toggle and put in different items for this. So if you maybe Skype with her, you might want to put her Skype ID in. Or LinkedIn or her Facebook. You can put all kinds of different things in. And I'm sure that like Zoom addresses are going to be added soon. Emergency contact information, you can put that all in QuickBooks. Relations. Then there's additional information. And if you are an accountant or a law firm or something that keeps track of a billing rate level, you can add billing rates. And then an employee ID number if you have one. Then we also have custom fields. We have up to 7 custom fields that we can add to be whatever we want for all of our employees. And again, this is all the employees across the board, not just 1 or 2 of them, but something we want to track for all employees. And if I want to add something new, I can define fields and say maybe I want their children's names. I'm going to just type in my label and say I want to use it for my employees. Click OK, and now I have another field. And you can run reports based on these fields also. Also on the Payroll Info tab, this is your main tab for your employees. Your payroll schedule, I'll show you how to set those up in a little bit. And then class. And again, if you only have one location or one department that this employee works in, you can just choose the one class. And you can always change it as you're going along if you'd like. And let's say Tina makes $35 an hour as regular hourly rate, and then she gets PTO, or maybe I just put overtime in. QuickBooks, as long as you set up overtime, will set it up as 1.5 times the regular rate. Additions, deductions, and company contributions. If she has 401k, I can put in the amount. Say she wants $50 withheld each paycheck, I just put in 50. If she wants 10% out of each paycheck, I have to make sure I put the percent sign, because otherwise it'll take out $10. And depending on how old she is, I can put in the limit for the 401k. Now, if she has a 401k regular and a 401k Roth, you have to be careful with the limits. Because say she wants 10% to go into her regular and $50 to go into her Roth, you need to manually double check those limits as you're going throughout the year to make sure that they're not going over the 19.5 for withholding. The most important item on the payroll info tab is the taxes. And the taxes is going to come from your W-4, your W-T-4, your W-4 Minnesota. It's going to come from those forms. So if you're using an old W-4 form, or if you're using the new W-4 form, you have to just tell QuickBooks, I'm going to use the new form. And here it asks me all the information that's on the form. And it pretty much goes line by line through the new W-4 form. So this is important. Make sure you get these right. And then your state. In this case, I'm with California. Normally, I'm going to have Wisconsin. I'm not going to do these because it's going to ask me to set up all the states. But you just choose your state. And then your state withholding. And if you do have any other withholdings, California does. There are several states that do have additional withholding. And depending on what state you're in, that's where this additional withholding will come from. Also, the Medicare employee additional tax. So if your employee makes over $250,000, they should be set up with Medicare additional tax. And QuickBooks also has some things set up with the CARES and the paid leave credits. If any of you are using these in QuickBooks, they don't necessarily work like they're supposed to. And if you need a workaround, I have one. So if you are paying the FSCRA or the CARES, anything like that, employee retention credits, just let me know. Maybe send me a question or a chat, and I can with your email address, and I can get those out to you. And sick and vacation. For sick and vacation, you can either set it up in the employee defaults or you can set it up by employee. And sick and vacation works like this. It's got two halves to the window. My first half is my sick time. My second half is my vacation, which I'm using PTO instead of vacation. So you can have two different type of pay types that QuickBooks will track for you. So let's say Tina Fey, I'm going to give her 40 hours of vacation or 40 hours of PTO when she starts. And I'm going to give her, say, 16 hours of sick time. My accrual period. Now, if they accrue so many hours per hour or per paycheck, here's where I'm going to set that up, or for every hour on the paycheck. Okay, so she gets to accrue sick time I'm just going to say she accrues it at the beginning of the year. So we're starting mid-year. I'm going to give her 16 hours now. At the beginning of the year, the beginning of her anniversary year, let's say, I'm going to give her another 40 hours. Check the box if you have a use it or lose it plan to reset the hours each new year. Otherwise, if it's unchecked, then QuickBooks will keep rolling anything that hasn't been used over into the next year. And if you're going on anniversary dates, the beginning of the year is whatever date you put in here. So let's say Tina started for me on May 14th. And I want to start accruing the time, if I'm accruing it, on May 14th of 2021. So that's when my new year is going to start. If I'm only allowed to roll over, say, 20 hours of sick time, I can tell QuickBooks there's a maximum hour of carryover. And I'm just going to say, don't remind me again. And as PTO, again, here's where I can say she's got 40 hours available. Accrual time, maybe for accrual or for the PTO, she gets so much per paycheck. So maybe she accrues 2 hours per paycheck, and the maximum amount of hours she can have is 80. And again, if you're doing this by anniversary date, you can have it begin on a different day. And if you're doing it on maybe the first of the year, a lot of companies do that, you can have the year begin on a certain date. So I'm going to click OK. So that's the gist of setting up sick and vacation time. If you're not quite sure you're setting it up right, QuickBooks has a couple sample companies out there that you can play with. That's kind of how I learned to do sick and vacation time, and I'll show you how to get to those in a moment. Employment information, this gives you hire dates, original hire dates, so if somebody maybe was rehired. Adjusted service dates, release date. Release date is when the employee stops working for you. You always want to change this after their last payroll. If you change this before their last payroll, they will not show up in the employees to pay. So keep that in mind. Employment details, seasonal, part-time, exempt, key employee, just different things you can fill out for those employees. And then different job details if you want to keep track of that information. QuickBooks will also track workers' comp. And if you want to do this, I would suggest playing around in one of the sample companies first, because there are a couple different setup options to the workers' comp. And if you set it up wrong, it could throw you off in a really weird, bad way. So just be careful with that workers' comp if you are going to use it. But I'll show you how to get into the sample company file. When you go into File, and I'm just going to close this company. When you're in QuickBooks, there is an option to open a sample company file. Click on the down arrow, and it gives you actually different industries. So whichever industry closely suits yours, you can choose that industry. And QuickBooks has a company file set up for that. So you can go in and play around in it. And that way you're not playing with your actual live data. We'll go back into our regular file. Okay, so here's our regular company file. Okay, it's going to be a little slow for me. Okay, so now I've got Tina Fey set up as an employee. Now I have a couple different options here. If I don't want to see all this employee information, I can make it go away by clicking the arrow. It'll just give me my employee list. In QuickBooks, you can attach documents. So I could attach a copy of the W-4 form. By clicking the paperclip, I can scan it in, or different ways you can actually save those items, and you can attach it into their actual pay items or their actual employee setup. So if you need to look at that, you can just click on the attachment, the paperclip button. You can also put notes for your employees. When you do a note, oh, that's an edit button. I'm sorry, the notes are down here. Sorry. Here's my notes. If I want to add a new note, I can add that note here. Let's say that Dan has next review date is 4/11/21. Then I can set a to-do, which is going to be a reminder. I can set up that to-do as a task or whatever it might be. Set my priority. I can say with an employee, Dan Miller, and what date it's due. Let's say 4/11/21. That doesn't like the way I put that in. And if it's something that I've already done, I can mark it done or inactive. But we're going to keep it active, and I'm going to say OK. Yep, details. So now I have a to-do set up for Dan. And if your reminders, under your company menu and reminders, here's where it's going to show me my to-do notes. So right now, these are the to-dos. Upcoming to-do notes are on the right. And here's Dan's review. And from the reviews, you can open the preferences and have QuickBooks show you when to remind you. Under My Preferences, whenever you go into your company file, you can have QuickBooks show those reminders when you open the company file every day. And then the preferences, how you want to see them. So it's a fun thing on to-do notes. You can have QuickBooks remind you of things. And from that to-do notes, I was going to show you that also. From my reminder list, you can add things right onto this list. So those are my notes and to-dos. If you email, maybe pay stubs, those are going to be in your sent emails. You also have an option for transactions. This will give you, based on the date range, you've got paychecks, liability checks. You can change your columns so it shows different things. I can review this as a report. I can sort it differently. All different things you can do on this. And your payroll. Here is where we actually go in and pay the employees. So I mentioned before about pay schedules. Here's where you can set up your pay schedules in QuickBooks. I'll make this screen bigger. And here's your payroll schedules. You can do a new one, edit schedule, or delete schedule. Well, right now, my schedule is in 2007, so something's wrong there. Or maybe I did a payroll and maybe I issued just a bonus check and QuickBooks put my pay period way ahead of where it's supposed to be. So I just go into payroll schedules and edit that schedule. And then I can just change my dates. So my next pay date is going to be 12/29 of 24, because that's my sample company date. And this should be 2 weeks before, so say the 15th, and the date appearing on the paychecks is 12/29. And you can set up several different pay schedules. So maybe your owners get paid monthly and your staff get paid twice a week or every 2 weeks. That's how you would just edit your pay schedules or add a new one. Okay. If you're doing bonus checks, you should do an unscheduled payroll. But if you accidentally do a scheduled payroll for bonus checks, all QuickBooks is going to do is it advance this pay period date, and then you just need to go in and edit your schedule. So that's setting up your payroll schedule. So I'm going to go through and do a payroll. So I'm going to say, okay, this is my regular scheduled payroll. And from my regular scheduled payroll, it's going to show me all my employees. And so what I can do, I can change these columns that show up by going in by Show Hide Columns. So anything I want to show up on the screen, I can just move over. So maybe I want to see the class and be able to move and choose my classes. Well, Tina right now is the only one I've got a class assigned to. And then I could put in my hours right on the screen, or if I wanted to see each employee's detail of their hours and everything associated with them, I can either click on their blue highlighted name, or I can go into Open Paycheck Detail. So I'm looking at Dan Miller right now. He's salaried. Because he's salaried, I can put in the hours. And also for a salaried person, you can track their hours or their time by customer job. So let's say Dan is a salaried person. Say he works 10 hours on one job. And then he's got a salary. And he's got 20 hours on another job. I can just come in and choose the job names. And QuickBooks will break out his time based on the hours by job. Let's give him one more time area. So he's got 80 hours. Okay. So you can go through and assign jobs to employees and do job costing right on the screen. He's got health insurance. If there's any other items that he might have, here's where you're going to put that information. And QuickBooks is going to take and figure out what the taxes are based on the payroll tax tables and the W-4 information. And you can see QuickBooks is also tracking his sick time, vacation, sick accrued, and vacation accrued. Let's say I'm just going to put his time to remodel class. And let's say he had taken some vacation time or PTO. So let's say he took 5 hours of PTO. So QuickBooks is going to subtract that 5 hours off of PTO. Oh, it's not going to actually because he's salaried. So I lied about that. We won't give him PTO. We'll give an hourly employee PTO. So I'll save and next. And here's Elizabeth. She's got 80 hours of regular time. If she had overtime, sick hourly, let's say she's got 78 hours of regular pay, 2 of sick pay. So you can see in my sick pay available, it was 40. Now when I put my 2 hours in, it goes down to 38. So QuickBooks will track that for you. So as I look at her pay area, it's going to give me my withholdings, and over here my company summary. So this is the amount that the company has to pay for that employee. You can go save and next. And here's Greg. Maybe Greg had some job costing. Again, you can put that information in. And here's Tina Fey. Let's say she worked 80 regular hours and 4 overtime hours. So, and you can see QuickBooks is taking my 401k, taking the $3,010 she's going to get paid, multiplying it by 10%, and then it's taking my Roth of $50. So QuickBooks will track that for you. If you have a company contribution, say there's a 401k match of 3%, you can also set this up in the employee setup. QuickBooks will calculate your employee match. Okay, so that's how we start our payroll. And then I'm going to continue. And it's going to give me a little summary. And if I had direct deposit set up, it would show me which employees were getting direct deposit. Since I'm in the sample company, it's not going to let me do that. And I'm going to go into create paychecks. I can either print the paychecks or print the pay stubs. Also, here's where I can also tell the system, do not advance the date of this payroll. So you have that option right here if you remember it. So I'm going to say print pay stubs. Well, maybe what I really want to do is email them. Select the pay stubs, then click print or email. Okay, so I've got these selected, and I'm going to email them. So you can email these right through QuickBooks, as long as you've got the employee's email address set up in their employee setup. If you want to put in some kind of text with the email, you can click default email text, and there's different templates. You're going to choose pay stubs, and then a current default. Let's see if it'll let me there. I'd have to go into the template screen in order to do that, but that's where you can email your pay stubs. So I'm just going to preview, and it's going to show me my employees' pay stubs. As you can see, I chose that bigger font, so it's really easy to see everything. And I'm going to close. And then what I do after a payroll is I always double check everything. So I'll go in into reports, employees and payroll, and I'll run a payroll summary report. And this was for the payroll of 12/29/24. And it gives me their hours, their rate, and the amount they're getting paid. Here's my gross pay. Any deductions, as you can see, Tina Fey had some deductions. Then my taxes withheld, my health insurance, and then the employer contributions. Let's say I don't want to see all of my employer contributions on this report. What I can do is just wind it up by clicking the button, and it'll just give me totals. So if I click the down arrow, it'll wind that up. Click it again, and it'll show it back up. That's one of my favorite reports. If all I want to see is my totals, I can customize the report. Maybe I don't want to see the hours. I don't want to see the rate. I want to see the column by total only. I can change that information. And here it gives me a summary without everybody in detail. Well, from the summary, well, look, I've got zeros showing up. And if you know me at all, I hate zeros. Anytime I see a zero, it drives me nuts. It's a waste of space in my book. So customize the report, click on the advanced button, and say do not show the non-zero rows. And you can do non-zero columns also. Click OK, click OK. No longer is wasting space with zeros. So that's how I get rid of zeros. So that's my payroll summary report. When I'm looking at it by employee, I can go through, make sure I have the hours right, the salaries right, all that stuff before I actually finish my payroll. So if I need to go back and change anything, I can. If I printed the checks already, I can just void that check and reissue it. So it's important to get all your paychecks correct before you go into the Pay Liabilities window. The Pay Liabilities window tells you what you need to pay and when. And in the case of the 401k that I set up, it knows that I want it to remind me every week. But if I want to add that Roth that I had added earlier, I'm going to go down to the bottom of this page and change a payment method. Now there's some things I want to show you with the payment methods. Okay, so here's my tax payments. When I continue, QuickBooks wants to know how often and who I'm going to pay for my 940. Let's say I'm going to pay EFTPS. I'm going to set that up as a vendor. And how often I pay them. QuickBooks can pay most of these taxes for you directly online instead of you having to go out to the EFTPS website. Because I'm in the sample company, it's not going to give me the option right now, but I have a screenshot that I will show you of what it looks like in a real company file when you're setting it up. It will ask you if you want to do a check or e-pay. And by setting it up as e-pay, QuickBooks will track the amount that you owe, and it will go out and make the payment for you on the website. And you can tell QuickBooks when you want that payment withdrawn from your checking account. Okay? It really saves time, and I feel it's very efficient. So that's setting up the 940, the 941. Again, you can set it up whatever your pay schedule is. And the one other thing you're going to have to do when you're setting up a pay schedule and having QuickBooks ePay is you're going to have to set up your bank account in this section of QuickBooks. And here's where I can set up my benefits and other payments. So my 401k Roth, I don't have a schedule. I'm going to edit. Now I'm going to have the system remind me weekly on Mondays. Finish, finish, and give it a minute to refresh. And now it's got my pay liability window. Oh, and I changed the frequency of my 941, so now it's showing that I've got some additional ones out there to pay. And here's my 401k Roth. I also want to show you what it looks like if you're going to e-pay. So if I am e-paying, this is what my check is going to look like. So it's going to say e-pay. It's going to show an e-payment. If I paid it online instead, I can always change this to check. And it will let me tell QuickBooks when to withdraw it on. And you can even change the amounts if you need to. So this is when you're e-paying in QuickBooks, what you're going to fill out is withdraw on. You never want to give the government money before you have to. So I just want to show you that because those are things that aren't available in the sample company. So let's say I'm going to come in and I'm going to pay my $941 payment. QuickBooks knows that it's due on 1/3/25 based on my payroll dates. And because I told QuickBooks I'm a semi-weekly depositor, it's going to know what date it is due. So I can view pay. If I'm paying it online, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a check. I'm going to turn off to be printed because I paid it online. And maybe in the memo, I'm going to get rid of the check number. I'm going to pay it on 1/3, I believe is what it said. And in the memo, what I would probably put in the memo here is the confirmation number that you're going to get from the EFTPS system. So QuickBooks tracks the amount that you're going to pay, or that you should be paying. And say my 401k, company match, and Roth, I want to pay those. They're all going to Charles Schwab. I've got them all set up correctly. I don't think I did the 401. Oh, I might have. This one might be not the same one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a custom payment. And this is the old way that QuickBooks used to do it. Put in my paycheck date, click OK, and I have all three of my payments going to Charles Schwab. Okay, just wanted to double check that. But because they're different payroll items, let's see if it'll do it as one paycheck. Nope. See, it wants to do 3 different checks because there's 3 different payroll items. So here's my 301, which is my 401 employee. It's going to have a separate check for 90/30 and a separate one for the Roth. I just want one check, which is why I can go into Create Custom Payments. Again, put in my check date. Click OK. And if I click all 3 of them here, I'm going to review the liability check. So my total payment should be $441. Create. And it's going to issue 1 check. And there we go. So that's one way to get around having it issue 3 checks. Okay. All right. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit about your year-end forms and reconciling. QuickBooks will do your 941s for you. Pretty much any of your payroll forms, QuickBooks has that form available. You can see in California, the unemployment it will do for e-filing. It will not do it for Wisconsin yet. I'm not sure if it's available for Minnesota yet. But for Wisconsin, it's going to have the UC 101, which is your state unemployment. I always print that form before I go and do my report online because then I have all my wages. I just have to type them in off of the report that QuickBooks has. The 941, let's just say I'm going to do it for the quarter ending 12/31/24. QuickBooks will do your form for you. Again, it kind of goes line by line. through the form. If it's your final return, you've got to fill out some additional information. And you click Next. And QuickBooks, based on all the payroll information that you've done, is going to know all the amounts to fill in for your 941 form. Because I've got some outstanding payments, it knows that I have a balance due. What I would normally do is just close out of this form, X out, make those payments so the amount comes to zero. You can sign your name, put your dates in, all that kind of thing. If you right-click on these items, you can override. So if I'm not the CFO, I want to take this name out, I can just right-click and override and type things in. And because I have to file semi-weekly, I'm a Schedule B filer, so QuickBooks will do my Schedule B for me also. You may see the Submit form on the bottom. QuickBooks will submit your 941 forms. But before you do that, you have to register and get a 10-digit PIN number from the IRS. So when I'm in File Forms, I can manage filing methods, which is on the bottom of the page. And this is what you're going to need to file your 940 and your 941. Your W-2s and the state W-2s, you don't need this PIN number. QuickBooks will automatically file those online for you. So you can see e-file is available. In this case, it's a sample file, but so it's not going to let me do it. But when you go to the setup, QuickBooks will walk you through filling out the information that it sends to the government. And it normally takes about 6 to 8 weeks, but you will get a PIN number, a 10-digit PIN number in the mail. So when you do submit your first 941, you'll need to type in that PIN number. It works really slick. So if I want to do my W-2s, it knows I'm in the wrong year. So I'm going to choose my employees. I can review and edit the paychecks. So I'm going to say next. QuickBooks is going to ask me if I'm a 941 payer. Most people are. If most people are none for the kind of employer. And if you've got a 401k, retirement plans, third-party sick pay, just need to check the yes box. If you want to set up a control number, you can. And click Next, and it's going to show me the employees, the Social Security numbers, if they've got a pension plan or a third-party sick pay. And it's going to show me what the W-2 is going to look like, so I can review it. And again, with the W-2s, you can always right-click and override if you would need to. But be real careful if you're going to do that. Make sure you know that you're doing the right thing. And then it's going to show you the W-3 form. And then you can submit the form. I always check for errors. So it's giving me an error because of the years of the form. But that's how you're going to do your W-2s. One thing you're going to want to do is you want to reconcile the W-2s against your 941s. So what I have, let me bring this up over here, is I will have a my file of my 941 forms, and I will do a little reconciliation. So I take quarter one, put in my federal wages, federal withholding, Social Security wages, withholding, each quarter, and that total should equal my W-3. Just a little sheet I have to make sure that everything ties out. Because this is what the IRS actually, or the IRS and Social Security actually do, is they will go through your 941 forms and take your 941s and compare them to the W-3. And if they don't match, you're going to get a nastygram from them saying that these don't match, please let us know why. So that's one thing you want to make sure of as you reconcile. Make sure your 941s tie out to that W-3 form you're going to send in. Okay, let's see what other questions I had. To find a report on an individual employee for the gross, net, and deductions, talk about reports for a little bit. Again, there's a lot of different reports in QuickBooks for payroll. You can play with these. Again, with the payroll summary I showed you before, you can see I manipulated that so I didn't get the hours and rates, and I could filter it if I want. If I want to filter it and I want a payroll item of, I just want the gross pay, I can filter it. If I just wanted certain employees, I could filter it by employee. All kinds of things you can do with these reports. So if you're not getting exactly what you want, just try customizing them and or filtering them. Another thing with the QuickBooks reports is you can see in the top, this is something, the client-ready payroll reports are only available in the accountant's desktop because I'm a certified QuickBooks advisor. I have the accountant's version, so you're not going to have that. But you will have summarized payroll data in Excel or more payroll reports in Excel. So here under more payroll reports in Excel, you can see that it's got employee time and costs, sick and vacation history, direct deposit listing. So this will give you a listing of your employees' bank accounts if you have direct deposit, tax form worksheets, certified payroll reports, payroll liability accruals and payments, deferred comp for 401k, local taxes, payrolls by department and class, and then 401k reports. So these are some pretty nice reports. You also have summarized payroll data in Excel. Well, depending on the amount of employees that you have and how much payroll data you have, might take a few minutes, but with the more payroll data in Excel, let me show you kind of what that entails. So I ran this before, so you didn't have to wait for the system to get done figuring out the calculations. But these are pivot tables that grab your information directly from QuickBooks. So if you know anything about pivot tables, you know that they're pretty powerful. Well, I don't know a lot about pivot tables, but I'm getting to learn a little bit more and more each time. Because if I want, I can click in the pivot table and manipulate the data. So there's a lot you can do with these reports, with the pivot tables. It's kind of crazy the amount you can do, but if you're good at pivot tables, I give you applause because I don't think they're the easiest thing to do. But here's where if I wanted to, I could just say I just want this on one date. I can change my date. Instead of selecting all, I can select a certain date and do my report by date. I have nothing in there. So I'm going to filter my report by all. Let's say I don't want to see the Social Security number. Over here, I can turn that off. And now I don't have the Social Security number. So there's a lot you can do in the pivot tables. And these reports are canned in QuickBooks. You just need to go to the More Payroll Reports in Excel. Or Summarize Payroll Data in Excel, sorry. Also, as you can see, there's really, let's look at what the report shows for sick and vacation history. Because normally it's hard to get a good sick and vacation history out of QuickBooks, because sick and vacation time are pretty much live. So let's see what this will give us, because I haven't run this report yet. So we're going to do 24. I have different options and settings I could do. And I'm going to turn off the page break, get QuickBooks data. As you can see, it's retrieving records. And if you look into QuickBooks, it's going to, oops, it was quick for that one. It's in QuickBooks, it will tell you that it's pulling the data. So here it's going to show me what was used for your sick and vacation time and what's been accrued, what their balance is. So this is a beautiful report if you want to look at the history for sick and vacation. Okay. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm catching the majority of these questions that were emailed. I had a question on doing manual payroll. Can I have the state unemployment and federal unemployment calculate automatically? And nope. With the manual payroll, you can only have the wage items automatically calculate. Let's see. Handling changes to a paycheck, a payroll check after the 941 has been made. As long as you've scheduled that 941 payment out, you can cancel that 941 payment. So you go and log in under EFTPS, go to your payments, and cancel a tax payment. And any payments listed down below, if they have an X in front of them, it means that they're still available to cancel. Otherwise, if they don't, you can no longer cancel it based on timing. So if you do need to make a change to a paycheck after you've done that 941 payment, you either need to cancel the payment and redo the payment in QuickBooks. And in QuickBooks, if you are paying in the system, you just go in and void that payment in QuickBooks. So under my pay liabilities, say I've made an e-payment, I can find that payment also by going into my register. So let's say this was an e-payment. I can just come in and void that check. And then it'll put the liability back in the pay liabilities window. Or if I've had to make a payment to a paycheck and do another 941 deposit, that will also show up. Let's see. How to get rid of the excess dollar amounts that show in the payroll liabilities. This is a very common problem with unemployment. Say your unemployment online, when you file it, it shows that you owe $268.02 when you pay it online. Well, QuickBooks has accrued $268.03. So when I go to pay this in QuickBooks, I'm going to view pay, and I'm going to say, okay, QuickBooks, I'm going to let you think we're paying the full amount once the window comes up. There we go. I'm going to tell QuickBooks I'm going to pay the full amount, but I'm going to go to my Expenses tab, and I'm going to find my Payroll Taxes account, my expense account for my SUTA. Or you might just have Payroll Taxes, whatever you might have it as. And I'm going to say minus 0.01. Then I'm going to hit the Recalculate button, and it's going to switch to the 268.02. So that's the best way to do that. Also, if you've just got that 3 cents hanging out there, let's see. Let's say, let's do this one. I'm going to view pay. I'm going to pay 3. So now I've just got those couple pennies hanging out there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go pretend to pay it. I'm going to put my expense account as, I don't want my payable account, I want my expense account. Let's go back down here. My FUTA expense, minus 03, recalculate, it's going to be a 0 check, save and close, and now it's gone. That's the easiest way to get rid of those cents. Job costing, we talked a little bit about that for payroll. I also got a question on workforce, which is view my paycheck and troubleshooting. And we really don't get a lot of information out of QuickBooks on that. They do have a chat feature on their support page for the workforce, and that's probably the best way to go about using workforce. And workforce is a feature that QuickBooks offers that your employees can log in and get their pay stubs, their W-2 forms, things like that. So just so you know, that's available. Direct deposit is available for a fee in QuickBooks. Works pretty nicely. And now in our next couple minutes, I'm going to go through and see the information that came in on questions. Can you import data for timesheets? I'm not 100% sure. I'm thinking probably, but I know there's a lot of programs out there that interface. They're a timesheet program that interface with QuickBooks. I think you would almost have to have some kind of IIF file that imports in, and I don't know how to create those. So it just depends on how good you are with importing, exporting. That's something I don't get into because I can't write programs and things like that, but it is possible. Otherwise, there might be, if you Google something out there, there might be a program already written to do that. So can't quite answer that 100%. How do you email from QuickBooks? Again, we talked about emailing the pay stubs. And in your preferences, there's a preference for send forms. And once you set up your send forms and your email information, that's how you would email out of QuickBooks. Let's see. Will we get a link to this webinar after the meeting? The webinars are normally posted on our website. I'm not sure how long after the meeting they get posted, but they will be posted at some point. How to set up company paid health insurance. So if your company paid health insurance, if you want to track the company versus the employee payment, you would just set up a new payroll item. And it's going to be a company contribution. So when I go to that, set up a new payroll item, I'm just going to do a custom. It's going to be a company contribution. And I'll say company portion of health. Again, the accounts that you want it to post to. Tax tracking. Let's see, do we have a company portion? I don't think we do. Let's see. I don't think we can get it to print the DD on the W-2 form, but you would set it up as tax tracking type none. And then for each employee, when you're setting up your employees, you would set up in the payroll information, the employee's portion of the health insurance, and then the company's portion of the health insurance. So if Greg's health insurance was $100 a paycheck, that means the company's portion is $87.50. So you're just going to set it up as a company contribution. Yes, we are being recorded for future viewing. As I said before, it will be available out on the website. If I set up a payroll schedule, can I delete it? Of course you can. So my payroll schedule, I can delete. Just have to click on the down arrow. And then we got a union question. Let's see. Let's see what I can do in the next couple of minutes to answer a union question. Okay, that's a tough one about employees that perform union duties and non-union duties. And the union duties are subject to pension and dues percentages. Can we run a separate employee for the same person so that we don't have to end up paying pension dues on the non-union activity? No, but what you'd want to do is probably set up separate payroll items for that. So in your payroll item list, you would have subject to pension and then a not subject to pension. And then when you have when you look at your pension, that would be one of the, let's see, I'm thinking you could do something with that, but that's something I can't really answer 100%. And I'd probably need to discuss that. So if you do have questions after the fact, you can certainly call them in or email them. I can give you some, let's see, let me pull up a program here so I can give you my contact information. So, Debbie Denny, Hawkins-CPAs.com. And here's my direct line. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to give me a call. And in the meanwhile, I hope you all are healthy and staying safe amid all this coronavirus. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar today and were able to learn a few things. Again, Debbie Denny, and call me if you've got questions, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.